Have you ever prayed and felt like you were just talking to the wall? Your words bounce back, your thoughts echo, and heaven feels shut. You try to cry, you try to talk, but it's like God is far, or maybe not listening. You start wondering, did I walk away, or did he? Is he hiding? Or did I just stop noticing? Let me tell you something you might not hear in church. You're not the only one who ever felt this way. David, yes, the same David who was called a man after God's own heart. He once said in Psalm 13, "How long will you forget me? Forever? How long will you hide your face from me?" Even Jesus, hanging on the cross, said something no one expected him to say. "My God, why have you forsaken me?" So, if you feel far from God, you're not weird, you're not broken, you're human. But here's the real question. Does feeling nothing mean God isn't there? Think about a baby in the womb. The baby can't see its mother, can't really hear her clearly, but she's there, surrounding it, feeding it, loving it, every second. That's you. That's me. Sometimes we don't feel him, not because he left, but because we've been drowning in noise so long, we forgot what quiet love feels like. And maybe your heart is too full of hurt, or guilt, or just exhaustion. Because when we fall into sin, we often feel like we can't face God. And when life is too loud, we assume he's gone silent. And when people hurt us, you know what's tricky? We often tie God's presence to our emotions. If I feel peace, he's here. If I feel nothing, maybe he left. Maybe I'm not worthy. Maybe I did something wrong. But here's the truth. God's presence isn't measured by your feelings. Because feelings lie. They follow exhaustion, guilt, anxiety. Rarely do they follow truth. Sometimes we're like a baby in the womb. The baby doesn't see the mother, but she's there, everywhere, holding, feeding, loving. That's you, and that's me. God surrounding us, even when we're too distracted, too numb, or too tired to feel it. And often, the distance we feel, it's not from him. Maybe it's that unspoken guilt you carry, the one you've buried deep and pretend isn't there. Maybe it's the noise of the world that's louder than his still, small voice. Or maybe you're just hurt, and hurt people go numb. But God? He hasn't changed. David once said in another psalm, "If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there." In other words, even if you fall, even if you crash to the lowest point inside yourself, he is not far. But listen closely. Sometimes God is silent, not because he's ignoring you, but because he's waiting. Waiting for your heart to quiet. Waiting for you to stop striving. Waiting for the noise to fade, so you can finally hear him. Silence isn't always absence. Sometimes silence is an invitation. There's something we don't talk about enough in church. What if your spiritual dryness isn't your fault? What if you didn't do anything wrong? What if this season of silence is a sign of maturity? You see babies cry, and their mother runs to feed them. But when a child grows up, the mother doesn't rush every time he cries. She's still there, still watching, but she's teaching him how to walk without holding her hand every second. What if this silence isn't rejection, but training? What if you're learning how to trust, even when you don't feel anything? Job was a righteous man. He did everything right, and yet God went silent. He lost everything, and his friends told him, You must have sinned, but Job hadn't. Sometimes people will say, if you don't feel God, you must have drifted. Or, you need to pray more, fast more, read more. But that's not always true. Sometimes God hides himself so that you can learn to seek him, not the feelings. Because if your faith is built on goosebumps, what happens when the storm comes? You don't need emotions to be loved by God. You don't need fire in your chest to be close to him. You need truth. And the truth is, he said he would never leave you. He said he would never forsake you. And he has not. Right now, even as you listen, even as you sit in the dark, he's nearer than you think. But he's not shouting, because love rarely screams. It waits. It whispers. It knocks. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you sat with God without needing anything? No miracle, no answer, no breakthrough, just him. Because sometimes what hurts us most isn't that God is silent, but that we've forgotten how to simply be with him. We treat God like a rescue button. We run to him when things collapse, but when it's quiet, we assume he left. But maybe you haven't given him space to speak. You scroll all night. You chase answers on YouTube. You numb yourself with noise. You beg for a sign, but you never stop to breathe. Elijah once stood on a mountain, desperate to hear God. A violent wind came, but God wasn't in the wind. Then an earthquake, but God wasn't there either. Then fire, still no voice. And then a whisper. That's where God was. You won't hear a whisper if your mind is shouting, if your soul is running, if your life is filled with everything except stillness. Maybe the reason you don't feel him isn't because he's far, but because you filled your life with everything but him. Not in a condemning way, not in a you should try harder kind of way, but gently, lovingly. He's waiting for you to come sit. Not perform, not impress, just sit. Like a father who doesn't want your effort, just your eyes. You know, some of the deepest encounters with God don't come when everything is going right. They come when you're at the end, when you've got nothing left to give, when your prayers feel dry, when your voice trembles, when you don't even know what to say anymore, and still you show up. That's faith. Faith isn't the fire in your chest. It's not the goosebumps during worship. It's not tears down your face when the music swells. Faith is staying. When your soul feels nothing, it's showing up in the silence. It's trusting the one who feels invisible. Because real love isn't proven in romance. It's proven in patience. God sees that. He honors that, even when you don't feel it. And maybe, just maybe, he's teaching you how to walk by faith, not by sight, not by emotion, not by experience, but by something deeper. Jesus once said, "Blessed are those who haven't seen and yet still believe." That's you. Right now, not feeling, not seeing, but still here, still seeking, still hoping, still whispering, "God, I don't feel you, but I still want you." And do you know what happens when you pray that kind of prayer? He listens. He doesn't always answer with thunder, but he always answers with presence. Not the kind you measure with emotion, but the kind that anchors your soul, quietly, gently, forever. There's something painful about silence. Not the kind that's peaceful, but the kind that makes you feel forgotten. You wake up, go through the motions, and somewhere deep inside you think, maybe God moved on. Maybe he's busy with better people, more faithful people. less messy people. But that's not the voice of God. That's the voice of shame. And shame is a liar. You were never chosen because you had it all together. You were never loved because you prayed long enough. You were never held because you earned it. You were loved because He is love, chosen because He is grace, held because He is Father. And fathers don't abandon their children in silence. Even when the child stops talking, even when the child walks away. Have you ever watched a parent with a sleeping child? The child doesn't talk, doesn't ask for anything, doesn't say thank you or I love you. But the parent just watches, protects, waits, loves. You don't have to perform to be held. Some of you feel like you failed God because you're numb, because your prayers feel fake, because you can't cry anymore. But look at Jesus. He was in the Garden of Gethsemane the night before the cross. He wasn't singing worship songs. He wasn't giving a sermon. He was sweating blood, begging, alone, terrified. And even in that place, He still said, "Not my will, but yours." Faith isn't about feeling strong. It's about choosing God, even when everything inside you feels empty. Some of you are in a season of spiritual winter, and you're panicking, trying to revive what once was, chasing emotions you used to feel, wondering if you've lost your fire. But winter doesn't mean death. It means rooting. It means stillness. It means preparation. Nothing grows on the surface in winter. But beneath the ground, the roots are going deeper than ever before. That might be your soul right now. No fireworks, no mountaintop moments, just quiet. But in the quiet, God is growing something in you that will stand when the storms come. You keep asking, why don't I feel God? But maybe the better question is, am I willing to trust Him without the feeling? Do you still want Him when there's no reward in sight, no blessing around the corner, no voice in the clouds? Do you want Him for Him? If the answer is yes, even in a whisper, even through tears, even with your heart half broken, then you're not far from Him. You're closer than you've ever been. Because the deepest love isn't built on how much you feel. It's built on how much you stay. And you're still here. Sometimes we don't just wonder, where is God? We start to wonder, where am I? Because when we stop feeling Him, we start questioning ourselves. Am I broken? Did I do something wrong? Have I changed so much that He doesn't recognize me anymore? You begin to confuse silence with punishment. You assume distance means disapproval. But that's not the gospel. That's fear wearing a religious mask. The truth is, God knew every valley you would walk through before you ever took your first breath. He saw the shame you'd carry, the sins you'd repeat, the tears you'd hide. And still, He called you His. You're not invisible. You're not unworthy. You're not too far gone. Even if you feel like you've become numb, God hasn't turned His face away from you. Your numbness is not a wall to Him. It's a wound. And God is the only one who doesn't get scared of wounds. He touched lepers. He ate with outcasts. He wept with the grieving. He stood beside the guilty. He doesn't walk away from pain. He walks into it. And He's doing that with you now, whether you feel it or not. Let's talk honestly. Some of us have confused trauma with theology. You've been abandoned before, so you expect God to abandon you too. You've been ignored by people you trusted. So when God goes quiet, your heart assumes He left. But God is not a man. He doesn't walk out when things get heavy. He doesn't get tired of your need. He doesn't get bored of your silence. The cross wasn't a moment. It was a statement that He would go as far as death itself to make sure you never face it alone. So now, even in the quiet, He's there, not as a judge, not as a critic, but as a father who never moves an inch away from his children. You might be thinking, but I don't deserve that. I haven't prayed in weeks. I've messed up too many times. I've stopped trying. And maybe that's true. But God doesn't build His love on your consistency. He builds it on His character. And His character is mercy. David once said, "Even if I make my bed in the depths, you are there." That means even if you've chosen the darkness, even if you've created your own distance, God hasn't moved, and He won't. So what do you do in the silence? You sit, you breathe, you tell Him, even in a whisper, "I miss you. I don't know what to say, but I want you near." No words, just me. And that's enough. He's not waiting for perfect prayers. He's waiting for honest ones. And even now, this moment, if you pause, if you listen beneath the fear, beneath the shame, beneath the noise, you might not hear a voice, but your soul might finally feel the weight of something real, not loud, not glowing, but steady and still. And maybe that's the beginning of presence, the kind that never left to begin with. Maybe you've been waiting this whole time for me to give you the answer, the fix, the key that makes God feel close again. But the truth is, this isn't a formula. It's a journey. And journeys include silence. Journeys include dark roads and flat seasons, and days when even your prayers feel mechanical. But you know what makes a journey holy? The fact that you didn't quit. That even when your heart felt like stone, you kept walking. That even when the fire died, you didn't turn around. That even in the absence of feeling, you kept showing up. God sees that. And maybe, just maybe, He's closer in the silence than you ever imagined in the noise. There's a kind of faith that isn't loud. It doesn't post verses every day. It doesn't cry at every worship song. It just stays. It gets up, goes to work, faces the quiet, and still believes, somehow, that God is good. That kind of faith? It moves mountains you can't even see. It heals wounds you forgot were bleeding. It grows roots that keep you standing when the storms come back again. Because they will come. The silence may return, the feelings may fade, but love, real love, doesn't depend on the weather. So what do you do now? You breathe. You tell God exactly how you feel, not what you should feel, what you actually feel. Even if it's just, "I don't feel you, but I'm here." Even if it's, "I'm numb, but I still believe you're near." Even if it's, "I don't know how to pray anymore, but I haven't walked away." And if that's all you can say tonight, He hears you. That's what grace means. Jesus once told a story about a son who left home and wasted everything. When he finally came back, empty, dirty, ashamed, he didn't even get the words out before the father ran to him. No lectures, no punishment, just arms. Maybe you haven't felt God in a long time. Maybe you're not even sure if you still believe. But if there's 1 inch of your soul still reaching for Him, then you're not lost. You're just quiet. And that's okay. There's a line that always stays with me. The silence of God is not His absence. It's the space where trust is born. So if you're sitting in that silence tonight, don't rush out of it. Don't panic. Don't run back to noise or distraction. Just Sit, let the silence stretch, and know that even here, especially here, you are not alone. You are seen, you are known, you are loved, even when you don't feel it, especially when you don't feel it. And that is faith, that you made it here. After all the questions, after the silence, after the ache you couldn't explain, you didn't quit. You didn't walk away. Even if your steps were shaky, even if your faith was small, you're still here. And that matters more than you think. Let's be honest. This journey hasn't given you all the answers. You may still feel numb. You may still wonder if God hears you. But something is different now, not because the silence ended, but because you've learned to sit with it and not be afraid. That is spiritual maturity, not fire, not noise, not certainty, but stillness and trust in the middle of the not knowing. Think about the story of the disciples on the boat. The storm was wild. They were terrified. They thought they were going to die. And Jesus, he was sleeping. Sometimes the storm outside looks louder than the God inside. But when they woke him, he didn't panic. He stood and told the storm to be quiet. That same voice, the one that calmed the wind, still whispers over your soul, even now, even here. So maybe you don't feel God. Maybe you still pray and hear nothing, but the question is no longer, where is he? The real question is, can I choose to believe he's still near, even when I don't feel him? Because that choice, that small, trembling yes, is everything. You're not chasing a feeling anymore. You're walking with a person, and that person doesn't leave, doesn't change, doesn't love based on your emotions. He loved you before you felt him, and he'll still love you, even if you never feel him again. That's the gospel. So as you rest tonight, don't wait for the sky to split open. Don't wait for signs and wonders. Just rest. And if all you can say is, God, I still want you, that's more than enough. Because the silence isn't the end, it's the soil, and something beautiful always grows from silence.